Welcome, everyone. You're listening to Nephology, the podcast dedicated to crypto, accounting, business, finance, and much, much more. I'm Joe David, the founder of Nephos Group and Miner. Please note that all conversations recorded are professional opinions, and if you'd like to know more or gain support, please reach out to the team directly. Now on to the next episode. So welcome to the latest episode of the Nephos Group podcast. I'm delighted to welcome Alex Garcia from Metabyte Studios with me today. Morning, Alex.
Morning, Joe. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
No, thank you for being here. How are you doing today?
Yeah, very well. Thanks yourself.
Yeah, pretty good. The weather's got a bit crappy here in the UK now, but
Yeah.
I guess that's summer over and time to move on. So
time to knuckle down.
Exactly, get on with things. So, thanks for joining us. We'd like to understand a little bit about the guest before we kind of dive into some of the kind of more technical points that we hope to chat through today. So I wondered if you could give us, a quick overview of your story, but also what brought you into the kind of crypto and Web3 space.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I'll say a little bit about Metabyte Studio. So we help brand owners launch their web presence. And if they're feeling extra frisky, we can also onboard them into all things Web3, so smart contracts, customized marketplaces, and tooling. And in terms of my story and how I got into crypto, I think everyone's got their, I knew about Bitcoin way back in the day story, right? So in my case, it was about reading about Bitcoin in Wired magazine. This must have been back in 2011. And of course, I'm kicking myself now. I didn't invest at the time, but I started investing just around about the 2017 ICO craze. And I was just building my own automated trading algorithms and just having a bit of fun with it. But more recently, with all this Web3 stuff, I was aware of what was happening on the surface level, but it was actually my good friend and now co-founder who really opened up my eyes into the depths of the space. And I just, I fell in love. I went down the proverbial rabbit hole. And I was working for a hedge fund at the time, so I wanted to make sure I wasn't breaking any contractual obligations. So in my spare time, I just worked pro bono, didn't take any shares or any payment. I just wanted to learn the ropes. And it was fun. It was counterculture. And it was like this blend of many of my interests coming together. So that's kind of how I got into this.
Yeah, I love that. And I think a lot of people, you use the word rabbit hole. I think pretty much most people you talk to in crypto use the phrase they went down the rabbit hole and probably never came back out or so far they haven't come back out anyway. So
it's a one-way road,
it certainly is. And I like that you kind of took that upon yourself there to do that pro bono stuff to really try and gain that experience and learn in the space. Because, that's another thing that I'm massively I talk about a lot is that you need to be in the space, if that makes sense. It moves so fast. Like, it's impossible to say, I can help crypto companies, but actually you dip in and out of crypto once a month or something like that. The whole world changes as you know. So interestingly, so Metabyte itself as a business, then you don't just work with Web3 crypto companies, you also work in the Web2 space as well. Is that right?
Yeah, I just think, and this is part of a wider discussion, but we've just seen that, outside of this crypto bubble, most people don't really care that much about crypto and decentralization, right? So as soon as you step outside of this, so I think we just saw just a natural need for also doing Web2 type of stuff. But we are definitely Web3 native and we are, I'd say, Web3 first, although just based on seeing customer needs and customer demands, we've also started doing more Web2 type of stuff as well.
Yeah, okay. I guess as a business, as yourself, you as a business, you have costs and things like that as well. So you can't just focus in one section. So same for us, as an accounting firm, we work in the traditional space as well as working in the crypto space. But I don't know about you, it's much more interested in the crypto world. So
absolutely, yeah. Sure.
So we've spoken quite a few times about different bits and pieces, and we'll touch on something we're looking at together later on, but. When we have spoken, we've discussed many kind of pain points and issues, I guess that Web3 companies have. But what I'd like to understand from you is, what do you see as some of those pain points, and how do you guys kind of help mitigate those, as it were?
Yeah, nice. So what we actually did is, as I mentioned, we worked pro bono for an entire year. And our whole methodology at the time was to just stack on as much value as possible. So not only what we're inherently good at, which is the technical side, but also how does marketing work in the space, right? And can we outsource some of that? How does legal and corporate structuring work? And so having gone through that whole process, we more recently took a step back and literally just mapped out all of the pain points that we identified over this past year. And there's about 73 of those. And I quickly just wanted to say, I think this is one of the reasons I'm really excited to, first of all, be on this podcast and be working with you guys, because it just proves to me that you live and breathe by your values, which is you want to be innovative, you want to be different, you want to break the mold. And so when I identified a few of these pain points, one in particular seemed to have a very natural fit with accounting services. So I just reached out and said, okay, let me reach out to Joe and see if you'd be interested in partnering with us on this. And just the fact that you kind of replied and said, yeah, look, it sounds interesting. Let's give it a crack. Just proves to me that you're not only saying that you want to be innovative and different, you actually live and breathe it, which I think is very, very rare for accounting firms in general. But I guess it's to be expected, especially that you're one of the only ones actually operating in the crypto space. So, hats off to you.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I think it's you've kind of hit the nail on the head. It isn't natural for accounting firms, but also like professional services in general to dive into a risky world. And I think part of what we want to do is kind of break that mold a little bit and say, well, it doesn't, you don't need to just stay in your lane. There is, of course there's risk. There's risk in everything we do, right? In every, even crossing the road, carries an element of risk, right? So if you're going to spend your whole life, kind of carrying away from risk, you're never going to do anything or achieve anything. That's my view. So don't get me wrong, you need to take calculated risks, as I'm sure you guys have as well. But you also need to kind of, if you can see an area, but I do think the really key thing is being passionate about it. And if you're not passionate about, say, crypto or whatever, then you're never going to really kind of grab it by the scruff of the neck. And I think you probably agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that was just evident, the fact that I reached out and I said, look, we've identified this. And I think I could just kind of see that passion coming through in the sense that you're willing to roll with the punches and have a crack with these things. Because as you said before, these things move so quickly. So you have to play around and see what's going on to be relevant in the space.
Yeah, absolutely. And the nice thing about that as well, we'll touch on it in a bit, but the nice thing about that was I had clients in the area that we were discussing, and therefore I could reach out to those clients, which I did, and say, if you had this as an issue, what would you do if this was an issue? How would you resolve it? So that's another great thing, is that with the connections we've got, we can also ask those questions as well. So just as a kind of I guess follow on from that, if you could name kind of 2 or 3 of the biggest pain points that you guys can solve, what would you think they would be?
Okay, so this is kind of my hot take on the space. And so definitely some of the biggest innovations that we're going to need are going to be technical, right? Of course, we're going to need to improve basically just the UI UX experience so that the user doesn't even know that there's crypto and blockchain stuff happening in the background, right? Because you couldn't care less when you use an app. You just want the thing to work. So if it happens to be based on blockchain, that's great. And I think once we get to that point, then it becomes really mainstream. But I actually think the biggest innovations in the space right now need to come from what I call ops and operations. So by that, I mean legal, accounting, tax, finance, this kind of stuff, the old fashioned type of stuff. And why do I say that? The reason is, and I think I got this concept from Tim Ferriss. I'm not sure if it was his idea, but in any case, that's where I first came across it. So a very good way to start a business is to look at your own spending, right? So you look at your spending, whether it's your personal spending or your spending as a business, and you look at your spending over the past year, and you look at what have I spent a huge amount of money on, and or what have I been price insensitive to, right? And so for us, that was legal and kind of tax, accounting, this kind of stuff. And the reason for that is, especially in the crypto space, there's a lot of cowboys in the space who don't have an idea, don't have any clue what they're doing, and they're taking advantage of the little guy. I think there's very murky regulations in the space that make it really unclear, like, how do I do this? How do I do that? Banks will just flat out reject you if you try to open up a business bank account with them if you just have the word Web3 on your website. Like, there's so much, it's such a huge pain point, I think, if you're in the crypto space, that's also why I think you guys are perfectly placed to tackle that. and to solve these pain points. And I think, frankly, if I had your qualifications and skill sets, I'd probably be doing the same. So that's kind of my hot take. I think the biggest innovations need to be happening in that kind of thing.
I appreciate that. And anyone listening to this will probably think that I've just paid you to say that, which I absolutely haven't.
No, absolutely. Listen, this is 100% genuine. And I think that's also why I'm excited to explore partnership opportunities with you guys, because frankly, as I said, I'm also selfish, and I think I see that as being the biggest opportunity. So if we can provide more of a technical layer, then that's a win-win.
Yeah, 100%. And, one thing that we are not, we will absolutely hold our hands up, is we're not technical. We're not developers. We're not, kind of, if you like, able in a sense to do some of the bits and pieces. And that's where I think for me, and I've said this for years and years and years, that you should do what you do best and let other people do what they do best. And that, is, I think, perfectly sums up the partnerships that we're trying to look at doing together, because we know what we can do, you know what we can do, and we know what you can do, and you know what you can do. Do you know what I mean? So we very firmly know where we sit and where we don't. And I think that, that is crucial. So no, I totally agree. So I guess maybe we should touch on that, because we've now hinted at it a couple of times, but we haven't necessarily discussed what we might do together. But do you want to kind of talk through where the thought of it came from, what it is, and how together we feel that we can solve quite a big problem in the space?
Sure. So as I mentioned before, we work pro bono, we identified a bunch of pain points, and obviously we can't tackle all of them. So we just looked at, what are some low-hanging fruits and just some genuine pain points that we can solve. I think quite often, frankly, crypto can be a bit of a solution for a problem, but we don't like that. We want to make sure that we're actually solving real pain points. And one of these things, quite simply, is that if you use a marketplace like OpenSea to launch a NFT collection or token or whatever it might be, then there's only one payout wallet address, right? So any money that you make from that collection can only go to one wallet. And if you have a lot of contributors, maybe you collaborated with other creatives, maybe you've got marketing people or other developers on board and so on, then you have to then go and do all that manual accounting yourself, right? Which is a bit of a pain. And it becomes exponentially more painful when, the more complicated the distribution is, right? So if you have, 10 different contributors and they all have different percentages and all that kind of thing, then it becomes increasingly complicated. So we just thought, okay, why don't we build a royalty splitter, a revenue and royalty splitter, whereby, you could just simply send us a spreadsheet. You say, these are the wallet addresses that we want we want to split the royalty with, and these are the percentages, and so on. And then we take care of the rest. And we just thought that was like a perfect thing that we could partner with a crypto specialist accounting firm on, because it's just kind of like a natural fit for accounting. So that's why we reached out to you, and that's what we're looking to launch in conjunction with you guys. And yeah, so that's a little bit about the revenue and royalty splitter.
Yeah, thank you. And I think the really kind of interesting fact with it is, like you said, you could have built this product on your own. You could have just said, in fact, you are going to build it on your own. We're not going to build it, but you could have done this, said, here's a product. Now, if people want to use it, they can come to us and have it and use it and whatever. But again, I think it's testament to you guys, what you want to do as a business, is that you've said, look, we can do this on our own, but if we can bring in a specialist firm like ourselves to kind of work with you on the financial, actually kind of tax and accounting side, it bolsters your product significantly as well. So again, we're talking to those complementary services. You bolster our services by building this product. We bolster your services by adding on the accounting and tax. And together we've got a really good product that we can go to market with. And like I said to you when we spoke about it, I did some research on it. And it's amazing, start Googling these things and you see all these kind of comments on Reddit and things like that of, people that have got issues with this, that, and the other, and it all relates to it. It's a problem that I didn't know existed until I started looking at it. So I think it's a great product, and what, now we can go to our clients and say, look, this is a solution that we've got in conjunction with you guys. So yeah, I think it's great. We're, I guess, ready to roll with it, as of now. And if anyone's interested in talking about this, they can reach out to myself or Alex and we'll have everyone's kind of details in the description as well. So so I'm excited to and I think personally, I think it's going to be the first of many things we discuss and potentially roll out together as well. So lots going on. But going back to your point on the banking and things like that, I thought that was quite interesting because we have a lot of those problems, as you can imagine, with clients and issues around banking and rejection of funds because they've come from crypto sources. But I don't know if you're part of the Telegram group for the Crypto Club Global in London.
That's not actually one. I mean, I'm part of like TuesDAO and all the other others, but not that one.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So somebody posted in there yesterday that MailChimp had suspended their subscription because they mentioned crypto. And I'd not heard of that before as a thing. Yeah. And I thought, what are we kind of coming to here where even an email marketing company like that ultimately they're a tool, right? They're not providing, the marketing. They're just providing the tools for the people to do the marketing, right? So where the censorship level is ridiculous that we can't, we can't even send something out on MailChimp that even mentions the word crypto. And I think, we might send an email. We don't use MailChimp, but we might send an email out saying we can help you manage your finances and pay millions in tax, right? For example, in crypto, right. We could say those words and then get blocked. And it's like the logic behind that just doesn't make sense that, you would block somebody just because of one word rather than, and like you say, the banks do the same thing. The banks, they see anything from a crypto exchange and they're not keen to kind of progress with that. And I think one of the reasons that I'm in crypto, apart from the fact that I, love the space and whatnot, is I like that kind of ability to say to the kind of big corporates or these kind of censorship type companies to say, well, actually, no, we don't need you. We can do this without you. We can, we're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination yet in an industry, but we're trying our best to empower people to make decisions. And I think that's what I think is really important for me is that, why should a bank tell you where you can and can't send your money? Assuming it's in a legitimate way, obviously. So I think that's one of the reasons that I'm in the space. I don't know about you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you touched on a really good point there, because what's interesting is that these banks won't even entertain a conversation, right? And it's like, we're trying to play clean. Like, we've really done everything by the book and we're playing clean and we're modeling our business model. We're like, try to, we're just a software development house. We've moved away from being an exchange of crypto assets or anything like that. But even then, it's like they won't even entertain the discussion. And the fact that this is kind of like just shut down, computer says no, just proves that there's so much that is still needed in the space for it to come to maturity. But yeah, in terms of why I got into the space and kind of being defiant and against the big guys, I wanted to touch upon this a little bit. I don't know how much time we have left, but it's kind of like...
good.
We're good? Okay, cool. So one of the things that, you mentioned about, being defiant and going against the banks. And I think ultimately when you peel back the layers, a lot of crypto and Web3, all this stuff is really based around decentralization, right? Would you agree with that? Right. So
just to jump in on that though, I do think the word decentralization needs a bit more firming up in terms of what it actually means.
Yes. Okay, great. So that actually tees me off perfectly because ultimately, when it comes down to it, you realize that decentralization is an ideology, right? And I actually think it's a bit of a red herring. And let me explain why. So first of all, for most blockchains underlying all this stuff, 70% of the value is held by about 100 wallets or so, more or less. So not very decentralized, right? Secondly, I think if you go out on the street and you speak to your average Joe, he couldn't care less about decentralization. Likewise, companies don't really want decentralization. It's against their best interest. So I think it's more about distributed systems. And there's an important nuance in the sense that I think you can still have these centralized entities, but they might be distributed across borders, across value chains and jurisdictions and so on. And maybe they're all coming together around a common goal. And in those types of scenarios, there might be fuzzy hierarchy, right? And then there's a whole bunch of other problems that aren't necessarily crypto specific, but I think crypto type approaches to things such as DAO tooling. So decentralized autonomous organization, DAO tooling can solve. But I think, much like yourself, I'm not sure if you agree with how I broke it down, but I think decentralization is a little bit of a red herring, and there's something wider and actually less niche and more exciting at play.
I absolutely agree with you. I think the concept of decentralization is not a bad concept. I think the concept of giving the people the holders, if you like, of the token or of the project, to the ability to kind of influence decisions, I think is a good idea, right? In principle. How you achieve that, especially right now, how you achieve that in a centralized world that we have right now, I don't know at the moment. I think that's a big challenge. I think one thing that is really interesting. I think if you go back to the Luna debacle, which none of us really want to remember, but when that all happened and they decided to fork the chain, into the new one and create Luna Classic for the kind of at the time the existing one, the community, if you read the comments from the community on the proposal online, it was hugely negative. Like, they didn't want this to happen. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't know what other option they had but to kind of fork the chain and start again, or shut down completely, right? So I'm not saying that what they did was bad, but if you look at the comments in the community, the majority of the comments that I read, the community didn't want to do it, but lo and behold, it got done anyway. And the point of that is, they may say they're a decentralized network, the kind of Terra ecosystem, etc. But clearly, when they felt that an important decision needed to be made about that business model, what happened? They made that decision, anyway. Now, like I say, that I'm sure there was things behind the scenes that we didn't know about that maybe did do some kind of voting system and things like that. But my point is, like you say, the bigger holders ultimately get the say, and therefore, if you can get enough of those bigger holders around the table, ultimately you can make a decision anyway. So I think I totally agree with you. Now, the concept, like we said, of decentralization can work. But I was talking yesterday to a few people, and we were talking about DAOs, funnily enough, and we were talking about DAOs in a legal wrapper. And I was kind of like, well, it's not really a DAO then, is it? Because a DAO isn't a legal organization, right? It doesn't have a legal framework. Right. So then all of a sudden we go, oh, well, no, this is a different type of DAO. And I'm like, well, no, it's not. It's just, it's a company that, has shareholders, or it's a company that has, kind of trustees or whatever it may be, right? So I think that's another thing is, let's get away from these buzzwords and let's get back to the fundamentals of what we want to achieve. What do we want to achieve? And let's take a DAO. With the DAO, what we might want to achieve is that the token holders get to make decisions. Now, it doesn't really matter whether you own 99% of them, Alex, and 50 people own the other 1%. Ultimately, you're still allowing the token holders to make a decision, yeah? And it's up to you then if you want to sell down those tokens to give more decentralization. So I think that, for me, that's the biggest, and I've ranted on a little bit now, but I think that, for me, is the biggest, most important point is, let's not pretend we're something we're not. Let's not hide from the fact that, yes, we want to get to a decentralized model, but at the moment, we need a few centralized people to help us get to that point. Yeah. But eventually, we might be able to move some of these bits and pieces, but, ultimately someone's still got to click a button, right? So, who does that? How do they do that, etc. So anyway, I totally agree with you. And I think that's maybe something we could come back on and touch on another time as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add to your point, you're right. There's the voting side of things. So for your network owners, and I think it's also, but one of the problems that I've seen with DAOs, especially, is like, well, who takes charge, right? And if there's no hierarchy involved, and this doesn't necessarily have to be a DAO, it can just be a project with lots of different partners. So how do you deal with accountability and incentives? It's very easy when you're in a centralized company and you have a boss, and the boss can fire you or give you a raise. That doesn't happen when you're dealing with a project with lots of different entities or a DAO. So like, how do you deal with accountability incentives? So I think even for people listening to this, maybe they can take something away, some inspiration. Project management in the way that it's currently done wouldn't work in this space, because it's all well and good setting up a Trello board, but if you don't have proper accountability incentive mechanisms, how can you actually enforce that the different people involved in this decentralized distributed project are actually going to deliver? So that's just something that, again, we've seen. Again, we didn't try to start a DAO. We were simply working on these more distributed type of project with different entities involved. And we were like, okay, this is kind of like a DAO, but it isn't. But I think those same problems are, happen across this. And I think this is a much wider problem than just quote unquote, the niche DAOs. So anyway, that's my take on that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think one of the things that we, I'm actually, in fact, there's a funny story about this. So obviously we met at the Swapsicle launch event, right?
That's right.
And if I remember rightly, I met you at the bar.
Yes.
And the only reason I was at the bar is because my wife decided she wanted to have a rap battle with Adam, who runs our accounting operations, and she was at the bar ordering drinks, and she said, "Oh my God, it's Eminem! I've got to have a rap battle with Adam." So she ran away to have this rap battle and said, "Joe, go and get the drinks." So actually, the only reason we ended up speaking then was because my wife wanted to rap with one of my team. So I thought that was quite a funny anecdote to kind of maybe end on how we ended up meeting. So,
that's so funny.
Look, Alex, really good to have you. I think we absolutely need to do this again. Maybe we talk about some different pieces. But first of all, thank you. And secondly, how can people reach out to you if they need you for anything?
Yes, I'm sure we'll put it in the show notes, but we're at Metabyte Studio across all socials. So just reach out to us on LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever you want, and we'll get right back to you.
Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. They'll be in the show notes. So fantastic having you with us, Alex, and look forward to speaking to you again soon.